There is no such thing as a stress-free life. Difference is in how much stress you allow in your life and how well equipped you are to handle it. In this video, I'm sharing the mindset shifts I've made and my favorite tools to handle the stress. If you're new here, my name is Maria, and this is your channel for creating a calm and balanced life. This video is divided into two parts, and you'll find the timestamps below if you want to jump ahead. In part 1, we'll talk about the mindset shifts that helped me remove the unnecessary stress from my life. And in part 2, we'll talk about my favorite tools which help me deal with whatever stress is left. So when we talk about the mindset shifts, it's important to introduce the concept of avoidable and unavoidable stress. Avoidable stress being things which you can actually remove from your life, and oftentimes, like in my experience at least, I kept this avoidable stress because I was a people pleaser. I was trying to keep everybody happy at the expense of my own inner peace. And unavoidable stress is stuff which, stuff happens. It's life. It would have been boring without it. And in fact, I often think about life as being like a computer game, and it being actually the point of it, like to have these little adventures or challenges or boss battles, all that stuff. Because I feel like we are sold on this idea that we should strive to some honestly unrealistic, imaginary place in life where everything is just blissful. I think that's not the point. And in fact, that was the biggest realization that happened, that really accelerated my inner healing process. Came from a book. Still to this day, like I even say to my kids, like if they read this book, it's like I feel they're set for life. It's Mark Manson's Subtle Art. And I read it when it first came out. I picked it up at the airport. I still remember, some things you just remember. They're stuck in the memory. I was going through the healing journey. I had already become aware that I had things to heal. I had a big, huge anxiety. I had a year prior started therapy in a more consistent way. Well, I had started therapy like 3 years prior, but it was more like a more consistent one. It was also when I had my 2 biggest tattoos done, which were like a huge inner acceptance thing. And just on the way to fly to get the tattoos done, I was at the airport and I saw this bright orange book. And I was like, oh, that sounds like something that can help me. And the main thing, the main idea that really made a huge difference for me was that we shouldn't expect life to be all perfect and flowing and honky-dory, and we should actually embrace the discomfort and the pain of it. And this was such a novel concept for me at the time, and I was already 30 years old and I was still chasing that whatever dream I've been sold on, and blaming myself for experiencing difficult emotions and having an imperfect life. And then when I read The Subtle Art, I actually, it's a funny story. I read it during the tattoo sessions because I had I think at the time, 2 6-hour tattoo sessions. And that was just, I think, for the black, outline and shading. And I read it during that moment, and I guess that's why I remember it so vividly. And there were times where, due to my own stupidity, I had enormously painful parts of this experience. And I remember covering my face with the Subtle Art book because I was like, oh no. So I don't know, the Subtle Art is this vivid meteor-like experience in my life, but then which landed and changed my world. Since then, I embrace the fact that life is the way it is. It is like a computer game. It is like the whole point of it is that there is pain, there is disappointment, there are struggles. And the sooner we embrace it, the easier it goes. The second mindset shift that helped me reduce stress in my life was the realization that grown-up people generally are responsible for handling their own emotions. I grew up in a family, and having grown up, continued seeking out people who essentially guilt-tripped me for having my free will and wanting to live my life on my own terms. And I fell for it. Until age 30 or so, I really tried to people please, and I felt bad about choosing myself. I only had literally a couple of cases when I made these big decisions against what my family wanted or what other people wanted. And guess what? Each time I made those big decisions and chose myself, it did work out well. Those were the big things. And each time I followed what others told me to do against my intuition, it backfired. And the very funny part was that one of these huge decisions where I followed my family's guidance backfired big time. And when it burst in my face and I talked to my family, they told me, well, in the end, you did it yourself. No one held you at gunpoint. And I'm like, yeah, but I did not want to do it. It was like a weekend when I visited my family, and they basically used every known guilt-tripping, brainwashing method to convince me to do something I didn't want to do. But still, when it came down to taking the responsibility for this decision, it was all on me. And I realized that, well, if I anyway am the one who always takes responsibility and accountability for my actions, I may just as well do the stuff that I want to do and that feels aligned with myself. Which brings me to the mindset shift number 3. And that was something I came to gradually, and it's trusting your own intuition and gut feeling. The thing is that I was very unsure of myself in general for most of my adult life. Even in obvious cases where, for example, there would be a conversation about something factual, I would know 99.9% certainly that this is the case. It's like Googleable facts. But then if someone else would talk to me with confidence and say, no, that's not it, it's like that, I would be like, okay, I must be wrong. They must be right. They're speaking so confidently. And I did it and kept doing it for most of my grown-up life. And then it took me a while, and I figured out there are a ton of people, rather unfortunately, in this world who will sit down and talk confidently and undermine my own intuition or even factual knowledge, and that I really shouldn't trust everything everyone says. This is, by the way, also one of the things that I teach my kids, and I can tell you that's a challenging road I chose as a parent, because I'm raising them with this, people will tell you stuff, but you have to double check. You have to trust your own gut. You have to Google the facts. You know what I mean? Because the world is such that if you trust what people around you tell you is the good stuff or is the bad stuff, you end up living someone else's life. Or in my case, I was basically allowing people to live my life by proxy. And what's the point? The whole point of this life on earth is to experience life, to make your own free will choices. I don't want to go into the woo-woo spiritual stuff, but from spiritual point of view, I view everything the way I see life as it unfolds is more like railroad tracks, and then occasionally there are decision points And that's where I'm a very visual person. Also, like in meditations, everything for me is like it comes in images, and very vivid images. And for me, the most striking part was when I received this very vivid image of railroad tracks shifting when I made a certain decision. And then I realized, like, oh, at least the way it makes sense to me is that everything in life is about certain key points where we make important decisions, and from there we choose timelines, or the direction our train goes in. And when I learned to trust myself, make my decisions based on what feels right for me, I've been thoroughly happy, like genuinely happy. And even when something doesn't work out, I'm the one who takes the responsibility and the accountability for my decisions, and at least I know they're mine. What is an important disclaimer is that it's a very tough road to step on, especially in the beginning, because I received so much pushback from people who were controlling my life and who benefited from me being insecure and sure of myself, constantly doubting, constantly people-pleasing. It was hard. It was emotionally very difficult process for me. I know that sometimes I come across as a very sure in myself kind of person, but I still have feelings, and I still felt horrible about disappointing people in my life. But in the end, two things happened. Some people accepted over time my newfound self-assuredness. Let me know in the comments which grammatical version is correct. And other people stepped away, or I stepped away, and that is the consequence that I am willing to take, because I am the way I am. That's my life. I'm living it on my terms, and people can either stay in it or not. But yeah, and because it was in the context of my very, very, very closest relationships, it was a very painful process. But looking back now, years down the line, I realize it was worth it. Because in the end, I also think that I'm not a psychologist. I'm not even going to go in that direction, but I do notice the correlation between my past, when I was struggling with constant anxiety. I mean, I can make a video about anxiety, like a separate one, because like I had no idea until I was 35 just how much anxiety I was living with. It was like through the roof. But like I was used to it. It was the only thing I knew. So my levels of anxiety, my periods of depression, and here, of course, depression has physiological roots related to gut health, but then also I think psychologically, there is definitely a correlation where when I stepped into my power, when I learned to take accountability and to be the bad person in other people's story, I actually, my anxiety and depression reduced drastically. And yes, it has something to do with all the remedies and like all the other things I've done for it, but I also think it has a lot to do with not having to go against myself for other people's benefits. And if they are disappointed, well, like I said, grown-up people are perfectly capable of handling their own emotions. And now the more practical part of it, my favorite tools which help me maintain my calm even in the middle of stress and chaos that life brings. And first and foremost is breath work. I'm starting with it because it's something that's available to each and every one of us, because it's something we do without even like realizing. We underestimate the power of breath. But I find that breath is possibly the most universal healing tool, and especially when it comes to dealing with stress. And for me personally, breath work is a very, very special subject, because there were some things in my life which, even after years of therapy, I could not, there were some things I couldn't even talk to therapists about, but which were sitting as a somatic manifestation of trauma in my body. And what did help was somatic release breathwork. And I am actually a certified somatic release breathwork practitioner for trauma healing. I don't practice it because it is, well, I have practiced it with, on some occasions with people when it was really necessary, but I find it is a very taxing thing, for me at least, but it is very powerful. And when we talk about more mild and applicable in everyday types of breath work, I think yogic pranayamas are something we all can look into, because even without reinventing a bicycle, if you just look a couple thousand years back and we think about pranayama, it's brilliant. There is something for every situation. You want to calm down, you want to get energized, you want to get warmer, you want to get colder. There's pranayama for every occasion. But on the most simple level, if you don't want to delve into that, we're talking here about sympathetic and parasympathetic states of nervous system. So when stress happens, the sympathetic fight, flight, freeze mode activates. You may notice next time, actually, if you pay attention, that one of the first markers of sympathetic mode is sudden, rapid, shallow breathing. It happens automatically. That's how our body is preparing to run away from the saber-toothed tiger, because not much has changed in our physiology in all those years of evolution. So it is helpful if you're physically running away from saber-toothed tiger, yes, but if you are a modern Homo sapiens living in modern society, being bombarded with stress-inducing information left, right, and center, that turns into chronic stress. So that is something, first of all, to be reduced. In my personal opinion, that was a huge thing, reducing the inputs. And second, when something does happen that is unavoidable, is to shift, learn how to use my breath to shift my nervous system from sympathetic to parasympathetic states. And the simplest thing is to first become aware when the breathing becomes shallow and rapid. And second, control your breath and start breathing slowly and steadily. In my personal experience, inhaling through the nose and exhaling either through the mouth as if blowing on a feather like this. I even usually imagine a feather on my hand. Or just through the nose, but making your exhale as lengthy as possible. That alone makes an enormous difference. And you may notice even a few rounds of this slow breathing with extended exhale really instantly, within seconds, shift how you perceive the situation around you. My second and also very much time-proven tool is physical activity. And I am a very physical person. I can't imagine my life without exercises of all sorts. Started working out with regular weight training when I was 14, and it changed my life. And at a pretty young age, I actually developed this thing when I would in any kind of really stressful situation, I would drop on the floor and start doing push-ups. I always joke that that's why I have a pretty strong upper body. I've done a lot of push-ups. But that is more of a instant and very fast release of stressful energy. And I love now, over the years, when especially I discovered yoga, I love after that following it up with even a short grounding yoga practice. And I find, without going into too many details, because yoga is an amazing healing modality in its own right, on a physical, spiritual, any level, there are some asanas in particular which really help me stay grounded and feel like this. We're working with chakras here. We're working with the body, like warrior poses, for example. When I do a warrior poses sequence, it really helps me like align myself and ground and feel that inner strength. So that's something I would do. And last but not least, and a very special remedy for me in terms of dealing with stress, are herbal teas. I grew up with herbs and like different leaves always drying in the kitchen, and for me it's something integral to just my entire life. I seem to have a good intuitive feeling for plants in general, and also for how different plant medicines like herbal remedies work and how they affect my body. But I find that herb teas are the most universally accessible and easy way to introduce something very profoundly healing. Herb teas work on two levels. On one level, there is the actual medicinal healing power of herbs, and on the other level, it's the ritualistic component of preparing and consuming herb teas. And for me, it is really one of the most grounding things I do. I can talk about different herb teas here for a long time. I've actually made a course about creating your calm life, where it's mostly based on various herbal remedies. If you're interested, you can check the link in the description of this video. But just to highlight my favorites, my go-to herb when dealing with stress is ashwagandha, and that is a beautiful adaptogen. You should not take it for too long. Maybe like a week or two at a time is best when you really need it. But it has made such a profound difference in my life. I always get on my soapbox about ashwagandha. I personally prefer consuming it as an herb tea. I make my own blends. I think I may include a B-roll of my tea drawer here. But yeah, ashwagandha is, oh my God, it's amazing because it doesn't make me drowsy. It is very calming. And when consumed as a tea, it is extremely powerful. It just takes the edge off of any of this instant stress-induced anxiety which my brain is prone to. I have a naturally very anxious brain, and probably why I am so good at helping people to achieve and maintain their calm, like in my client work and like everybody. And even when I was a lawyer, it's like my magic touch. I calm everyone down. It's because I had a lot of practice with calming myself. So ashwagandha, and I like mixing it with something like, I personally like mint, for example, and mix it with mint, because ashwagandha itself as a tea, it is a bit of an acquired taste, so you can play around with that. But if stress is particularly acute, I sometimes, very rarely, a couple of times a year, also take it as a supplement in capsules. And it's also then, well, it is then more effective, it's also more powerful, but I found I should never, at least for like my size, I should never take like the full recommended dosage that various different manufacturers put on their supplements bottles, because that just that's too much for me. But yeah, I personally always recommend ashwagandha as a herb tea. The only thing is, if people are taking a blood pressure lowering medication, then it should be consumed carefully, if at all, because ashwagandha does have a natural blood pressure lowering effect. And some other of my favorite herbs for herb teas are lavender. I mean, lavender is one of my favorite plants, herbs all around. Like, I love the smell, the look, the whole thing. And I find that adding just a tiny bit, like the tip of the teaspoon, to my herb tea gives it like this nice, calming, relaxing effect. That's of course if you like the fragrance. Mint, peppermint and spearmint, wonderful. And of course, our longtime favorites like chamomile. Simple things. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be like 30 different herbs in the drawer like I do. You can just pick a few which work for you and take your time to make a calming cup of herb tea, mindfully drink it, and you get benefits of both the calming power of herbs and the ritual of activating all your senses, like inhaling the aroma, feeling the warmth in the cup. Like, it is a full sensory ritual and a wonderful calming experience in its own right. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions or want to share something, please leave a comment. I make an effort to read every comment and to respond to most of them. Thank you so much for being here with me today, and I'll see you here next Thursday.